The following podcast is sponsored by Basico. At Basico, we understand your needs and pain points. Our expertise in CFO services, legal, finance IT, and people and payroll helps drive your business forward by inspiring change and challenging norms. We believe in deep explorative discussions and critical angles, the same spirit that fuels the Only Constant podcast hosted by our own Lasse Rindom. Discover more about Basico's vision and services at basico.dk. And if you like what you hear in this episode, please don't hesitate to share it with a friend. And now Lasse, take it away.
You are listening to The Only Constant, a podcast where we go beyond the usual discussions in technology and business and aim to explore more than explain. Join me for engaging discussions with a diverse range of global thought leaders as we seek to uncover new perspectives and insights in a free-flowing conversation. My guest today is Federico Casalegno, and I am your host, Lasse Rindom. Hi Federico, and welcome to The Only Constant. I've been very much looking forward to speaking with you, and I'm so happy that we get to do another chat here on the show today, recording it for a great episode.
Hi Lasse, very nice. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here and chat with you.
So Federico, what is actually the difference between computational design and human-centered design, and are they merging right now?
Well, let's say that's a very interesting question, and a very simple way to answer for me is that human-centered design encompasses computational design. So computational design, the way I see it, is part of human-centered design. And the reason why I'm saying that is because when I think about human-centered design, for me, the idea is that you employ every tools in your toolbox, any capabilities, in order to design the product and experiences that are for people, help people to go through their own life, live better, live healthier, be more productive, etc. So computational design is an amazing domain, is an amazing discipline that really brings together advanced computing, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the way I direct how we apply computational design to our product development is really how you can design products that fit better people's life. In our particular case, we design wearables and apply computational design for wearables. So how you can make wearable products that are more comfortable, that fit better into people's life, that how you can design wearables that have sensors that are more precise and so on. So in conclusion, I would say that computational design is part of the human-centered design. And
But how then when we talk about some of the big Silicon Valley AI model providers, they're talking about how AI models are now at a singularity or something like that. It seems like the linkage here is sometimes broken, isn't it?
Well, I think that there are many, if you will, interpretation of computational design. My compass is always driven to design better products for people. So the way I could say this, computational design is the engine of the human-centered approach. It's powered by AI, validated by data, but always guided by the fact that you want to design better product for people. So computational design is basically the engine that we use, empowered by artificial intelligence, to design for people.
But what is I think Mark Lawn on an earlier episode of the podcast said, that we are building markets for products right now, with a lot of the technology that we're developing at the moment, right? Is this something you also see in your work, that there is a tendency that we say, okay, now we have this technology, this capability, this AI, now we need to figure out a way to put it into a product then you're turning it around, aren't you?
I definitely see that. I definitely see that there is a constant, if you will, acceleration of technologies or products. And then at some time you look backward and you say, oh, how these products can fit into people's life. So there is always this constant tension between technological innovation, which is really pushing the boundaries, pushing the limits of what technology can do. But as a designer, we're really anchored into the fact that what technology should do, not what can do. Both are very interesting approaches, but sometimes you see technology or products that are in search for people or for markets. But the way we always start, at least in all my work, is really by starting to understand people's desires, people's aspiration, then trying to bend the technological development to fulfill those elements, not the other way around.
Are you, Federico? I see you wearing glasses. You're not wearing smart glasses, are you?
I'm not. I'm wearing these are reading glasses. Right.
but the reason I'm saying that is also, that the smart glasses is, I always think that that's the thing people don't really want, right? But it's a thing people are doing anyway. Do you see it the same way? Is the technology, and there's so much sci-fi in the world right now, right? Also, how could this look in the sci-fi world? Everyone in Silicon Valley has grown up on Star Wars and Dune and whatever, and they all envision some kind of world where this would be this way, right? But do we even grasp what it actually means for humans to work in that way? These sci-fi dreams are not necessarily, designed around humans, right? And that's also why these wearables, you said, right? Smart glasses, is that a good thing? Of course, if you've been told to say it's a smart thing, of course I understand that. But
well, no. Let's say the first time I started to work with smart glasses is I taught a class at MIT. I think we're back in 2014, if I'm not mistaken, is where the first Google glasses came to market. So I was teaching MIT. My class was called Design Without Boundaries. And actually, the class was design and interaction. The scope was to explore new ways to use those, smart glasses, new way to explore how wearable computing can enhance the power of augmented vision or context awareness. So I think that there are use cases, there are moments where those glasses are incredibly powerful and can be useful. However, there are a lot of aspects that need to be addressed and resolved. The first one is privacy. How would you think social conversation, social interaction with someone is pointing a camera towards you? So we need to find definitely good ways to protect privacy and to make sure that we don't make mistakes in that in the there. So that's only one. But I think right now I see products coming to market, and we recently launched our new products. And I would say the point is, how do you really identify wearable, or how do you really identify the way new wearable computing can support people's life across a variety of potentially interesting use cases? So.
But it's also what you're saying. Also, you said, how would you want to talk to someone who's wearing a wearable like that? And this brings me maybe to what I also wanted, maybe I wanted to discuss is what about ethical design or societal design, right? So human centered can be just me, this is good for me, or this is optimizing me, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's optimizing the environment that I'm in or the people I'm with, the bias I'm part of, right? And isn't there always this with technology, this what do you call, fault line or fear or problem, or what should I say, this era that we end up creating, autistic humans, right? Humans closed in their own loops, optimizing themselves, having glasses on, but not necessarily thinking about how it's received, Isn't that always a challenge? How do you deal with that as well? And how should we think about that also when we're, everyone's talking about AI and everything right now, right? But how should we think about designing things for more than just sub-optimizing individuals, but optimizing society and ethics as well?
I think that you have at least in what you're saying there are at least two very interesting aspects. The one is how should we think product for optimization, but how do we need to think optimization and what does it mean? And the second one is how those products impact our life socially, culturally, intellectually, and so on. So these are for me the two distinct elements. To answer or to try to provide a point of view on the first one, we're basically are saying artificial intelligence or new tools, new technology can optimize production. I think you're right to say that optimization need to be directed towards something. Optimizing, it doesn't mean that you can produce more images and you are immediately more creative. Optimization doesn't mean that you write a poem in a fraction of a second and you are a poet. So you can optimize writing, but doesn't mean that you feel love. So optimization can be applied to certain tasks and not to everything. Actually, in Greece, there is an interesting, there are two words that discuss how you can think about time. One is chronos, which is the chronological time. So you can think chronologically how you can optimize tasks in a linear chronological way. But the other word to indicate time is kairos, which is the right moment to make decisions. So it's not faster and more linear, but how do you make the right decision? So optimization. Of course, AI can bring you tons of images, can write poems, can create stuff. But production is not meaning. Production is not understanding, is not learning. So there is a big gap, and I totally agree that now we're thinking production and optimization only in terms of how you can augment the speed of certain things without leaving enough time for people to sediment information, to process information, and really to change. Our brain function differently. So that's the first one. And the second question, on the second point is equally important to me is, how should we think this ethical compass, how we should design in a way. The way we approach is always, on one end, driven by data and driven by understanding. So in all my work, I push all my teams to try to understand people. To understand people not in terms of how do they use products. It's not a usability test that you start with, but it's really how do you understand people's aspirations, people's problems, people's dreams. So it's the higher level of it. And then how do you unpack and how do you bend technology, product, and innovation in order to design product for them? However, I don't expect people providing the solution. At the end of the day, as a designer, you need to stand up and you need to somehow orient and bend what you're doing and take ownership of what you're doing. You don't expect asking consumer, what do you want? They give you the answer, you make a fantastic product. No, you talk with consumer, you empathize, you iterate, but definitely at one point you need to stand up and have a point of view. So at the end of the day, the secret in this point is with my teams, we have deep discussion about values, about choices, about what we do and what we design. And I think the secret is to create teams that are informed, that are good teams, that have a good spirit, good art, and they're really trying to do the best that you can.
So it's like you talk about value, right? Productivity is not value. That was sort of the first thing you sort of said, right? With your time, Chronos and Kairos, which I really, really like. That's a really, really good way of putting it as well. And also saying, that comes back to sort of outcome and how are we, outcome and value is also something that we do as a society on a whole and for each other, right? We do it to be better with each other, right? We don't just do it to make me better or make Federico better, right?
Right.
But I also realize right now that we should definitely discuss the big conundrum of how, because I've discussed this a lot on the podcast, right? That we don't necessarily know what we want, right? I've said it before on the show that and right now everyone can work from anywhere, right? We have tons of digital tools at our disposal, more than we've ever had since COVID, right? But still, everyone is moving to the big city. They want to live the same places, so things are irrational that way, right? And we have I always use this example. We have Spotify, right? We have Apple Music. We have tons of digital music, and then people start buying vinyl. Would you have come up with that? Would you have thought that vinyl would have get a renaissance when everyone suddenly had Spotify? And what does this imply? For now we have, as you said, something that can write everything for us, or generate any kind of code, create any kind of image. Well, what does that mean for writing? What does that mean for coding? What does that mean for imagery? Right? Where are we moving? It's a completely impossible question to ask you, Federico. But I think if I should ask anyone, it should be someone like you. What would you do? If you sat down with this language model now and you said, okay, my team, we should do something with this. You wouldn't just say, let's make more LinkedIn slop. I bet that would not be your suggestion, right? How would you go about that?
Well, also a lot of question into that, but let's say, for example, you started to say that productivity is not the value. Well, in a certain sense, actually, productivity is the value. But what does it mean, productivity? If you ask probably my father, my grandfather, productivity, the way they answer how you have been productive these days, I've been sweating 7 shirts. In Italy, you say, to sweat 7 shirts means I really work hard. So that's what they say, and I'm good. If you ask Gen Z and younger generation today, what does it mean productivity? Productivity is probably, I've been doing something meaningful today. So it's not like working hard. It's something meaningful, being, something that impact positively the planet, for example, which was not and this brings us back to the fact how we can design tools and products that definitely carry the values that we believe in. So that's one very important point. The second, you're right. I mean, in a moment where productivity, in a moment where artificial intelligence is capable to produce different forms, different videos, you can just talk to a machine and magically produce like an amazing videos that, this was 3 years ago was very different from today, and in 3 years will be incredible more advanced. So the production of a video, the output is easy. What become incredibly complicated is the meaning of this production. So it's easy to create an image, it's easy to create a love letter, but it's very hard to feel it. So and to me, so these are very, producing is very different than making in a way. So almost I would say I started my PhD in France, and in France there was the cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Can we say today is like a computo ergo sum? But doesn't mean it really define humans, right?
Yeah. Cogito ergo computer, right?
Right.
Or something. You think your computer, but you're right about that. But also the problem is that when it's so easy to do, it loses value, doesn't it? It becomes a complete commodity, and I still think that is something that we're still missing out on here. How we don't care about it, like 150 years ago, if you could get in a car and be transported from New York to Philadelphia in a couple of hours, people would be amazed, right? I'm amazed at going at that speed. But today it's like, it's a boring trip. Oh,
right.
There's no amazement.
But I think, those tools for me, when I think about artificial intelligence or how these tools really help, there is one level, for example, AI is exceptional in automation. You can automate tasks at the speed of light and automate in an incredible way. AI is really good in optimization, how you can optimize certain tasks. AI is very good in computation as well. computing, counting, and AI is incredibly good for production. You can ask images, you can ask to produce video and so on. So, but this doesn't mean that there is any sort of creativity. So users behind any software, you still have users, and user as a human, they need to somehow to direct. They need to keep the ethical compass, the moral compass of what we do and what we want to express, which is going really hard. I mean, it's going to be very, very hard, because it's easy at the end of the day to ask a machine to write something, to do something for you and just use it, because it becomes easy. So that will be, in my opinion, a challenge. How do we keep this ownership of creativity? How do we keep enough understanding of our feeling, our intentions, our desires, so we are the one using the machines, not the other way around?
I love that you are being so clear about, saying you're building direct products. You're not just being some, keynote or thought leader, but you're building direct products, and you're saying feeling, intentions, emotions. You're saying these things are important, right? And you're putting them as, you're not saying how can we generate more shareholder value or more, but you're actually saying that we are, and I like that, because in the end, that is what generates shareholder value, right? If you can build things that connect with people, right? It's exactly. Always oblique, the routes to that, right? Routes to that.
Yeah.
And I just wrote down when you were talking now, because you said also the cogito ergo sum, and you said the human-centered design. We talked, that's everything, right? And then I just wrote down, that we should automate for life, but we should not automate life, right? That's maybe the distinction. That's my small proposition.
Like I really like that.
Yeah, right. It's a... Maybe that should be a T-shirt, right?
I really love that. I mean, the way I put it is technology without humanity is perfection without purpose. So technology can keep optimizing itself and work faster, better, etc. But at the end of the day, you need to put the human input. Otherwise, it's remain a pure perfection, but we are the one who give purpose, and purpose is not universal. It implies choices, it implies point of views, and so on. So it's up to us to provide the right purpose, the right direction to products and to what we do.
It reminds me of Robert Fuchs, my episode with him. He's designing steering systems and technology for Toyota at JTEC in Japan. He's a German in Japan, but that's why it's Robert Fuchs instead of... But what he said at one point was that sometimes they build, a really big steering setup and, complex, tons of cogs, and it's just really, really complex setup. And then they gave it to a human to drive it, right? And the human was like, I can't feel the road, I don't like this. So they could have spent, half a year or a year building this. And he was like, nah, it doesn't feel right for me to drive. I can't feel the car. And then they had to go back again, because in the end, that was what it was all about, that he felt he wanted to drive the car.
Exactly.
That's simple, right?
Yep.
A lot of guests on the podcast have also noted the importance of friction, to feel we are here, to move something, right? But how do you incorporate something like design in products when AI is talk of town, promising to remove friction, right? How do we keep the meaningful friction? How do we avoid, automating life away, right? And also, the love letter is also that's a friction point, right? Where you mentioned the love letter a couple of times now, is because you want to touch someone else's heart, and that heart is a friction point, right? Because you're full of uncertainty. We can't get rid of that uncertainty. So how do we design products to sort of, do not do that?
I think that's another excellent question, and this is why you always start by trying to understand the higher level of the context in which you operate, in which you design. So, for example, right now we're doing a lot of work on agentic interaction, which basically means that you delegate agent task on your behalf. So, technically, it becomes easier and easier to delegate, an agent will execute on your behalf. And you can do it really fast. So you can, ask an agent buy a pair of shoes, and the agent can buy it at the speed of light, or send an email to do this. However, if you don't infuse friction points in these interactions, how do you trust an agent? How the agent, instead of buying a pair of shoes, you need to come back to you and negotiate the price or ask it the price, or you need to validate a purchase or not. So technically, as we're saying, become easier to create a really fast interaction that can be executed in no time. And there is certain value, of course, in the way we can imagine how you interact with products, how you interact with interface really fast. So you want to, in that case, you don't want to have friction. You want to get where you need to go at the fastest pace. On the other hand, sometimes you want to stop this speed and add point of reflection for the user. Do you really want to buy his? Do you want to buy that? Do you have the map? So again, this is friction. I think is an incredible, powerful tool that need to be used by designers in order to accomplish at their best what they're trying to do. If they design a product, if they design a physical product, digital product, an interaction or a space or a system. So the way we really do it is, again, I'm going back to the same topic, but at the end of the day, you need to understand what you're designing for and how you can this aspect that will make the interaction useful and valuable for the user, but at the same time, how you can protect the user. So
but I'm going to add some of the Kronos to this as well, just to go back to, because the problem is that a lot of messaging in the AI market has been like, okay, we will be fixing, we won't have developers in 3 years, we won't have lawyers in 2 years, we won't have in half a year I will not be hiring, blah 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 blah. But this all sounds like it will take a lot of time. That's why I said Kronos, right? It will take a lot of time to do this kind of testing, to not just remove all friction, but to retain friction at the right points in a process, in a product, in a thing we want to do. It doesn't sound like this is simple.
I can't agree more. It's not simple at all. And again, voices that technically would be certainly possible to eliminate a lot of jobs. I have no doubts. In the office, I'm in San Francisco. In my office, we have a bus stop, and there is a big advertisement saying, "Don't hire human, hire AIs." This was last year. And the whole city of San Francisco, I had my teams, they're doing like visual ethnographies in the city, and they're capturing all the advertisement. And it is all about AI will do it for you. So it is clear that in the next, already today, but in the next few years, AI will be able to do a lot of our jobs from take a lot of the jobs that the white collars are doing. However, the choice is, we need to think a little bit more broadly. Job is not only related to a task accomplishment. Job is defining who you are, provide you social relationship, provide you context, provide you a meaning in your life, or partially. I mean, of course. So the fact that we remove jobs and delegate to agent, that's okay, but that definitely there are other paths that are equally important. It's not only substituting manual labor with agents, but we are going that direction. So all the big companies work in that direction. They're designing digital agents that are executing tasks. But again, also in this case, I still feel very strongly that there is a need of an intellectual compass. Because like lawyers, they not only apply rules and regulations, but they have a point of view. They have a sensitivity in the way they understand societies and cultures and think about the future. AI doesn't really care if the planet will be no longer inhabited by humans at the end of the day. So, in fact, for example, a formula that we use in our corporate design organization in Samsung is design is AI equally EI plus HI. So artificial intelligence is emotional intelligence plus human imagination. So with this formula, what we're basically trying to encompass is this idea that there is definitely this artificial intelligence, which is defined by the incredibly advanced computing and calculation, but there is also the emotional intelligence that we need to take into account, and then there is also the imagination that belongs to us as humans. So
that's a human imagination. That's also human desire, right? That's the whole point. And that is, and that's, it always brings me back to a thing that I've been thinking a lot about, also in my work, right? Saying that, okay, because, I work at a consultancy, and we could obviously, automate all of our interaction with all our clients, send out everything. But then we miss the point that a big part of what we do is relational, right? We are a relational company. We live from our relations with people, right?
Yep.
If we automate that away, are we even a company then, right? And some things, and I think Jochen Wirtz said that. Jochen Wirtz, professor of marketing from Singapore University, he said that, I like to remove, lots of friction in, I don't want to stand in line in a bank anymore to get my money. I would never, ever want to do that again, right? I don't care about that friction. But sometimes you want to, if I want to buy, for instance, a new kitchen, I'd love to have a chat with someone saying, is it a good idea? Would this make sense? How would you like to get into my kitchen? Would you think it looks nice? Don't just want an AI saying, that's a great idea. Of course you could make it work, but it would just be, that's a great idea, but it doesn't really mean that it is a great. I'm always cautious. Whenever it says it's a great idea, I think, no, I can't trust it. My problem is whenever it tells me this is a good idea, I get unsure about my idea. That's super weird. Maybe that's advanced AI usage, right?
Yeah, exactly, 100%. I mean, as we say, AI tendentially, you get usually very positive answers, but your best friends will answer very differently to the same questions. So your best friends will never tell you have a great idea. They will be very, they will apply critical thinking. So.
I'll look at you weird, be saying like, yeah, that's a good idea, and they'll be like, and you can see, no, they don't really think that. You'll be like, maybe, yeah, good idea, could work. You get the extra non-verbal stuff.
100%.
It's always this, also people saying, show me who your friends are, and I'll show you who you are, or something like that. So we have to also really, really consider that when we're working with these AI models, right?
Well, now we are thinking more and more like, AI, we think more and more to this notion of AI companions. Mm-hmm. Interfere, substitute real companions, which is one of the most powerful technologies nowadays, and one of the most problematic, I would say. So.
Yeah, because in the end, as you said, cogito sum, if the only ones I'm talking to is AI, does that make me an AI? I always say this to students as well. If everything you produce is only something that's produced with AI, then you are just an extension of a commodity machine, and you are a commodity, and you're worthless.
Right.
So it ends up there. But do you think then that AI is or is not? Because it sounds like you're also reverting to, have you? I wanted to ask you if AI is a design inflection point, right? But at the same time, I want to ask you more directly, maybe, has AI changed anything in how you approach your work and how you approach your work as a head of design at Samsung? Has it changed the way you go about doing that, thinking about that? Or is it the same approach?
Let me talk a little bit about computational design, because that's probably is helpful to answer. I established this new function, computational design, within the organization, which is basically is a method that uses AI, machine learning, and advanced computing to design, to optimize, and to validate products. And we apply computational design specifically for wearable. In our process, there are 4 steps. The first one is build the data set. What we do, basically, you need to create a 3D or 4D scans of humans, so we can create a digital twin of humans that cover a diverse population. And we have data of people, but you can also have anatomical data like bone, skin, fat, cartilage, and so on. So first of all, we create digital twins of humans that represent the actual demographic of the population. Step one. Step two, you define KPIs. What does it mean? Is before you start to simulate, you need to define what are the metrics of success. So do you want to create a better fit for a wearable? Do you want to create a sensor that captures more precisely? Do you want to increase the comfort of a product? So what are your KPIs? Step number 3, you actually train the models. So we use machine learning to train our models on our digital twins, our data set of images. So once that you have all of this, step number 4 is you start to simulate and iterate. So one of the examples is we create the digital twins of human ears, and then we start to simulate how a bud can better fit into your ears, and how you can create variation of the product in order to fit better, to be more comfortable, and so on. So what we also do with that is we actually test those products not only in the digital world, so we simulate with digital twins, but using 4D caption, so we can capture people running with buds. We take those information, we deliver to the robots, and the robots will start to simulate the same product. So all of this simulation in the digital environment, we test with real people and we simulate with robots, help. And this helps design better products according to the metrics, according to the goals that we define.
Yeah,
all this is possible. Exactly. All this is possible thanks to the advanced use of AI. So in that sense, artificial intelligence really help and increase the way we can use data to inform our product development, increase the speed by which we iterate and create innovative solutions. However, the secret remain one, which is all these processes are driven by amazing teams of people, individuals that have their own perspective and point of view. So artificial intelligence, answer to your question, is definitely changing the way we think. But right now, I am more and more careful. I pay more and more attention to the processes and to the thinking, less on the output of what we produce. Because the output become, in a way, commodized, very easy. What is complex is the rationale, why you do certain choices. And that's what, but again, these are incredible tools that help us to work in certain extent, to work faster, work better, deliver faster, but it's still not pure magic. There are still humans that need to drive the process in our case.
So do you use these AI models to, like language models, to create personas as well that test how they work? Or because I saw someone do that as well, and I'm always a little bit cautious about that. I don't know if I really think that's a good idea, but that is what you're doing as well, or is it? Or
no, I mean it depends. We use model. I know that there are like companies nowadays that they create personas, and you can and throw these ideas to digital personas. So I think that's only one way to do it. I would say what is important is that the teams, that the goal is not to ask personas what they think about the product or what they think about their experience. The goal is for our teams to understand what matters to people. So no matter what tool then they use, the end goal is for them to understand. So now you can automate everything, and you can do this digital. You can have a test of an interface, a test of the product, and you can run this by thousands of digital creatures. The point is, are you really learning what you need to learn?
Yeah, but I think that comes back to what you just said, right? That you're starting to spend more effort on the rationale behind why we're doing what we're doing instead of just the output. I think that is because I do that. I've actually said this at my own company for a couple of years now. I've said you shouldn't be giving partners finished PowerPoint decks or slides. You should give them your notes. I want to see your raw notes, your thinking, your observations at the client. We can always make it pretty with AI. I can write it up and make it pretty. That's not the problem. Thing is, what have you actually observed? Because I need to know that, because but people are, this also means, right, if we take this at face value or take this literally, what you're saying means that the rationale, intelligence, real human intelligence, and ability to distinguish, good and bad, or back to, we're back to, Adam and Eve almost here, right? Discernment really becomes exceptionally valuable, extremely expensive. That becomes a scarcity, right?
100%, yes. And that's
paradoxical, right?
Well, in a sense, yes, but this rejoin the point that you were making earlier in a society where you have all the digital music at your fingertips. People is buying vinyl.
Yeah. So, but is it then true what people are saying, that intelligence has become cheap?
Well, I disagree with that. I mean, maybe computing is big. It depends how do you define intelligence. Output is cheap. I don't know if this is intelligence. I mean, it's actually if you look statistically, I was reading some statistics. Is basically the Gen Alpha, this new generation, since we introduced mobile devices into their life, is the first generation that is performing less educated, are less capable to critical thinking than any previous generations. So I would say intelligence is actually decreasing rather than increasing.
Yeah, but that's also why intelligence becomes more valuable, right? But now with AI, we say intelligence is everywhere. It's getting cheap, but it doesn't really seem that way. It seems like the opposite is happening. We have more artificial intelligence, which means that we have less real intelligence. That becomes more valuable. That's just a really big paradox here that I think seems like a trap we're walking into, right?
I mean, if you confuse intelligence with advanced computing or statistical computer, is not statistically computer intelligence. As we are saying, there is a level that means that we do have emotional intelligence, human imagination. It's not only being capable to compute more numbers, more data at a faster pace. Is a combined articulation of processes information, but also applied imagination and emotional intelligence.
Yeah, and actually you're deciding the rationale, right? And it gets, Shannon Lucas talked about a lot about discernment on the podcast. I have this weird thing. It is really weird with me, but I've been doing it in many of my keynotes, right? Where I go back to, to Genesis, or the creation myth in the Bible, right? It's really super weird, because I realized that at two different points, right? That one thing is when they eat the apple, they get the ability to separate what's good from what's bad. So that's like the first intelligence, right? That's where humans become a thing, right? It is, and that's not to say it's bad to do that. It's just to say that this is primordial. This is what gives birth actually to humanity and our struggles, is good and bad. There is good and bad out there. You can discern it, right? Because that is actually what God does. God can discern good and bad, right? That's the point of the story as well, if you read it that way. And the second thing is that Adam has one job before Eve is made, and that is to give name to all the animals, right? Because he has to say, what does the animal mean in my world? Why is it important to me? And those two things are just, the two primordial, mythical, written down 1,000 years ago, ideas about what humanity is all about. And I think they're more important than ever to remind ourselves, right?
Well, you're saying Albert Camus, Nobel Prize, used to say, mal nommer des choses contribue au malheur du monde. Bad naming things participate to the sadness of the world. So right now we're confusing artificial intelligence with intelligence, which is again doesn't mean that you are more intelligent or maybe smarter. There is if we start to play with words, but I think giving the right name is important in what we do. And AI is always confused with intelligence, but again, I keep saying in our case that there are other dimensions that are equally important and complete this advanced capability to compute and calculate, which is, of course, is amazing and super important and very valuable.
It might be more important to call it artificial inference instead of calling it artificial intelligence. Maybe that would have helped us, right?
Exactly. So.
But on that note as well, right? Now we just talked about how intelligence is becoming actually scarce in a way. Do you believe in this world of abundance that some people are touting that we're going to get to? Where we'll have everything, we don't have to work. It'll be easy peasy. Yeah. People tend to. If you look around yourself, we have more than we've ever had, but we're still stressed and we're still going to work, right?
That's true. I mean, the problem is that having goods available doesn't mean that they're distributed equally. Having information available doesn't mean that you have access to or you can process those information. And in the example we were discussing before, it is amazing that today you have at your fingertips the ability to access such amount of information, art, amazing things. Doesn't mean that people really understand, appreciate, or is more cultivated, is more educated. And the problem is we're seeing an opposite trends. It doesn't mean that it's not because you're connected on social media and you can be discussing with your friends or be in touch with a lot of people that you're not lonely. Actually, there are interesting studies that show how loneliness is a rising issue in our modern societies. So I wouldn't confuse this abundance with something that has a good impact for us.
Happiness.
Yes, happiness. There is this very interesting study that has been carried in at Harvard, longitudinal studies for almost 100 years, trying to identify what happiness is about. And one of the conclusions, happiness is all about the relationships, not about money, it's not about career and success, it's not the relationship that you carry over time. As simple as that. But the happiest people in the world are not the richest one, they're the one that carry good qualitative relationship, and they're not maybe the ones that have hundreds or thousands of followers or connection on social media. So abundance doesn't really implies happiness, success, or education in a certain sense.
So what you're saying is happiness is friction, Federico.
Well, it depends. It can be friction if you mean that friction at the end of the day is making sure that you cultivate friendship, just not by adding someone on your social media and then you pretend you have a new friend.
Yeah, and you block the people that you disagree with. Sometimes you go into the discussions that matters, right? And you meet people and you exchange ideas, but also there's the friction of another person, right? I've also always been personally, also attracted to the idea that I've been thinking a lot about the idea that the thing that we are so preoccupied with potentiality in modernity, in this modern life, right? We want more AI power so we can do things, but we can't discuss what we want to do with it. We just want more, we don't actualize it. We just get the potential. We want more money, but what do we want to do with the money? We want more health, but what do we want to do with the health? We want youth, right? But we wasted the youth on nothing. We always want the potentials, right? We want freedom, right? But for me, it was always about spending my freedom, right? taking the most aggressive choices and spending it, because then I lived the fullest, right? And I think but that is also extremely dangerous and filled with friction and perils, right? Are we afraid of that? It's not a world of abundance, but maybe a world of cushions instead, right? Maybe that's the problem, right?
I think yes, it's the point that you made is interesting. Sometimes freedom is important only within certain constraints. So infinite freedom doesn't bring a lot of freedom. The fact that you don't have constraints, don't need to work, don't need to do certain things, doesn't mean that you are. It becomes very complicated to self-impose ourselves central rules, constraints, and so on. So sometimes regulation, rituals, social habits, all of that provide a proper environment where people can find happiness.
So you're Italian, right, Federico?
I am. Yes.
Yeah, but don't you miss that sometimes then, with the tradition and the small family values and all that?
I would say yes, but I will carry those traditions, those rituals with me wherever I go. So that's fine. And I think, if you bring this back to the, in a way, the world of designer, there is an Italian designer called Bruno Munari, and said it's very easy to add everything into a product. You can add a color, a form, a shape. What is really complicated is not this abundance of feature and things. It's like to remove everything to keep the essential. So abundance is okay, but in every rock there is a David. You need to remove all the unwanted marble to leave the perfect statue.
Yes.
That's the role of designers, to remove things, to remove.
You actually just gave me physical, literal goosebumps. Thank you for that, Federico. I really, really, really love that quote what you just said there. I think that was there's a David and everything. Yeah, I really like that, and also I just really, sometimes I live in, I come from Scandinavia, and sometimes I also think about how we don't necessarily interact with each other. And then I remember 20 years ago, I was in Italy, in a small town, Penne, outside of Aquila, I think. And then we were just looking out of the window as some people were making a lot of noise. And then it was a wedding, and then they said, come down. And then suddenly we were at an Italian wedding. And we're like, what is going on? But these people, you're just mingling it together, right? The tradition, the city, the small village, right? And sometimes you're like, okay, I think this can also be, of course, there's this suffocation to it as well. Everyone knows each other, right? Everyone's looking at what you're doing. Everyone's being like, judging you as well. There's a risk to it. There's a cost to it. But then they're also going to that party and they're all being like, and everyone's invited, right? You get my point. There's always this trade-off. Things cost things, but good things will cost you something. And that is maybe the limit to abundance, right?
Yep. And again, the role of designer is exactly the one to try to balance those. And actually, we use it's very easy nowadays. I was saying before, with artificial intelligence, it's very easy to add forms, shapes, images, products. What is very complicated is discern what you like, what you don't, what is useful, what is valuable, and how you keep the integrity of the product that you're designing. So I think there is even more this need of being capable to select and choose. And in order to do that, you need to go beyond a simple answer that an LLM can provide you. You need really to really think about it. In our case, we're really trying to move, if I may say, the way we are thinking, how we design. And we saw over the years that, let's say, the Bauhaus monolithic, purified, simplified form factor is the predominant design language that our products are designed, which is very different from the past. So somehow nowadays the Bauhaus style, let me say, is the predominant. What we are doing right now is trying to move into the more expressive Memphis, empathetic, colorful design in order to design new products that somehow reflect the variety of people, of desire, of demographics of humanity. Without saying that Bauhaus is bad, not at all, but it's not the whole picture. So provided a variety of forms and products, is we really think that we are switching from this Bauhaus into the more expressive. And this is a way, this is how we think that we can meet the expectation of people today, because the products that we do design are not only functional, but are really product that you have in your hands, in your body, for extensive hours, and you also create a forms of empathetic relationship with the products that we have.
Yeah, but it's like, saying that I tell people all the time, white is so easy and everyone likes white on the walls. You paint it all white and it's easy to sell. I'm like, yeah, but you don't think about when you have to sell it. Think about you want to live it, right?
Exactly.
Paint for life, not paint life, right? I think, again, back to that. So get some colors in, because that's nice to live in, right? It's the same thing. And I spoke to one of my friends is an artist as well, and he's sort of, I always call him my like a canary, right? Because when there's no oxygen, he dies, he suffocates, right? It's like the canary in the mine. So he has this weird, he has an extremely well evolved, intuition for what is good, what looks good, what feels, what will be the new thing. He's always been a little bit ahead of time with his clothes and what's good design and all that. And I just see right now he's so preoccupied with something like Art Nouveau and all that, and how we can make things more organic in that design again. It's coming back. It's very much. I looked at some wardrobes for my new apartment. He was like, "Oh yeah, but I you should really." And then he found some where there was some of that Art Nouveau style thing. Basically saying, "Oh, this looks elvish, right?" Then we go
exactly.
But that's the same thing you're saying, right? They're moving away from this people in boxes, right?
Exactly. To embrace diversity, to give people different choices. That's exactly the direction we're pursuing right now with our new forms of design.
But you're also you're both a leading executive for design at Samsung, but you're also a professor at MIT, Federico, which you also talked about a little bit before. And you've been this for 20 years, right? Isn't that correct?
Yeah.
Is there what is the biggest gap right now between your professional and academic work, or is there a gap?
Well, I'm no longer professor at MIT. I've been professor for many years, and at one point I joined Samsung, and in the year 2020 I left MIT, even though I still have a lot of relationship and I do a lot of work with, but I left MIT. I used to say that when I was at MIT, I had a lot of sponsored project and research sponsored by private corporations or public institutions. And so I used to bring companies to the MIT. And now that I am in Samsung, I bring the MIT spirit into a private company. So for me, I keep the same, in a way, center. I think, of course, the academia has very different missions and objective, which are different from a private corporation. Which, at the end of the day, our goal is to make profit. So we are not a charitable organization. We are a for-profit organization. I think, in a way, but I see a divergence in certain objectives, but a convergence in many others. And one of the reasons why I joined Samsung at one point is that while I keep strongly believing in human-centered design and how we can impact people's life, I had more opportunity to do this within such large corporation. Samsung, where when you design a new product, when you design a new wearable that is capable to capture and inform you about your well-being and your sleep, or having access to your memories through your mobile device, this is how you really bring joy into people's life.
Yeah, and it scales to a global consumer base, right?
Yeah. Then there are still things that we keep doing it at MIT, but in Samsung, but at a very similar way nowadays. But definitely, one thing is very important for me that I could experience at MIT, and when people ask me the question, one of the answers that I provide is always being at MIT is where you really learn a lot. I've been learning so much from students. Probably I learn more from students than they learn from me, because like there is an amazing variety of diversity in terms of discipline and thinking and people, and every year, every semester, there is something new that happens. So there is an incredible, powerful richness of activity and thinking, which is amazing. And in our case, we are definitely more, we gravitate more towards production. But still, we of course, there is a very rich environment. I joined Samsung in 2018. Today, in 2026, I would say the company evolved so much. The way we started to think, first of all, experience design as a main direction, and now the way we apply AI to what we do and how we do it. I mean, I see a huge evolution and the type of products we are designing. At the end of the day, 9 years, but we're really moving fast. Even though internally you have the impression that we could move faster and do better, but when you take a little bit of altitude and see things, was incredible. When I joined MIT, Samsung in 2018, I reported to our C-suite what I was thinking in terms of the age of experience, and the age of experience became the Samsung CES keynote in 2020, and this was pivoting from purely product feature driven into really thinking how we can focus on the experience first. So that was a big moment. Now we're evolving. We have a new CDO with whom we are 100% aligned, and we're really bringing this human-centered design and the way we can think, as I was saying, this shift from Bauhaus and into more expressive products that meet people's desire in a different way.
But doesn't it always also mean, I'm curious about the shift from MIT to Samsung, because I think that's interesting. I always thought, at one point I thought I should become a professor or a PhD and go that academic road as well. I'm an educated historian. I've always been very nerdy in the different topics I engaged in, and I always envied these professors who can say okay, let's have a class about Spain in 1500s. Okay, cool. So different students, please read a lot of things for me and tell me what you've read so I can get smarter around. Yep. and this creativity of each student going in different directions, right?
Yeah.
And they did it because this is important, and it's the young new generation coming in with new ideas, and they approach Spain 1500 in a different way. They just go do, and then you realize, oh, this is what I need to be focusing on, right?
Yep.
It must be difficult to going into Samsung then and say, okay, but we have this couple of weeks where we do strategy, and this is what we want to do with the product, and then it's all goal oriented from there. It's not this, in academia, it's this exploration sort of all the time, and you sort of source it from the students. Now suddenly all the students at Samsung, all the people, all the employees are working towards a goal you defined already. Or is that, is a big difference in that, or how do you feel that?
Of course, there are differences between academic institution and corporation, but I have to tell that from my personal experience, I feel pretty lucky. When I was at MIT, I was working on a huge variety of topics. Basically, I was applying design-driven innovation to explore a variety of things. So we design smart home with AI. We apply computational design to design shoes. We design a big system. We design transportation system, electric, e-bikes. So we design a variety of things. But now when I look what I'm doing here at Samsung, we design from how agent to agent converse, how you design trust for mobile devices, how do you design wearable for health, how do you design new interface and companions for TV, how do you design products for smart home or for pets. So I still feel lucky enough that I have enough opportunity to explore a variety of topics. Again, there are differences between the two and how you do it. But in my particular role, which I'm really pushing design innovation 360 degrees, I think we have enough freedom to explore a variety of topics and form factors. Right now, for example, everybody's saying, nobody knows which would be the new form factors that will be cohabiting with us. Like, we don't know where AI would be embodied. It would be a new phone, new wearable, new artifact, new robots. So now there is an opportunity to explore a variety of things. So that's again, I recognize that there are definitely differences, and that's normal. It must be. But I would say that I think at one point, I lead the design. I created basically the Samsung Design Innovation Center. So we have offices in Cisco, and HR at one point they told me that some of my members they used to say SDIC is not Samsung Design Innovation Center, but the Samsung Design Institute Casalegno, which is my family. because I used to push our teams to do so much work, so much ethnography, so much research to explore so much that we really spend a lot of times. And I think my teams at the beginning, they were very surprised, because basically I carry over this ethos of inquisitive mindset to really challenge reality, understand people, explore, find new methods, new tools to understand people in society. So then you can transform, you can transfer those insights into what we design. And the same was with at MIT. At MIT, I used to run classes where I had researchers from every department, so across disciplines, breaking the boundaries of those disciplines, creating new forms of, and this is exactly what I'm doing here, for example. Our teams here, they do have designer, creative technologists, ethnographers, strategists, interaction designers, and so on. So there is a richness of competences all working together towards.
But it makes me, you talked about the experience, the age of experience, and then it just made me think back on, you said, how you are now building products that are more unique or caters to people's creativity and all that. Aren't you always afraid that people will view wearables or smartphones or TVs as just commodities that should not stand out? Isn't that always the problem?
I don't know if it is a problem. I think if you look at the global scale, you have you have very different point of view and desire and perspective. So for some, they really need to have products that need to be celebrated and be at the center and view.
Yeah, but you get my point. My point is, if I buy a Volkswagen tomorrow, right, I wouldn't want it to be red because I would think that would be standing out too much. But if I buy a Ferrari, it has to be red. You get my point, right? So if you say Samsung is going to be a Ferrari, maybe you're misunderstanding what Samsung is. And maybe, we should make a gray Volkswagen. To get my point, it must be really difficult to find that. Where do we make something that looks unique or different or completely making Art Nouveau Samsung devices might be the wrong choice, right? Because sometimes people would just say, I just need my Samsung smartwatch to look like nothing on my arm and just be smart.
That's why I think that we have a variety of products, really a lot of the very different products. If you look at our portfolio of, for example, mobile devices, you have a variety of mobile devices from, look at the foldable, very small foldable, very large foldable, form factor. And in my opinion, those are meeting different type of expectations. And the second point related to that, you're right. But I was saying before that at the end of the day, designers, they have an opinion. So if they feel that they need to design certain type of products with certain characteristics, that's okay too. I mean, the importance for people to have the right choices, and the important for us is to make sure that we meet consumer desires in the best possible way. And
some people want Hello Kitty phones as well, right? No, but it's true, right? It's not even a joke.
Exactly.
but on that note as well, just a final thing, because there's been a lot of talk in the AI world right now about user experience, if it's dead, right? If it's just becoming agentic on top of everything. Do you think the whole UX is dead? I talked to a lot of software firms as well, where they are not investing in user interfaces anymore. They're just investing in agentic capabilities on top of data, right? Do you think that's the right way to go about it? What is your hunch about that? Have you thought about that?
Well, let's say I have some point of view. If you think, let's say, if you define UX as the way that individuals access to informations, interact with products, interact with an interface, I wouldn't say that is finished. I mean, the zero UI thinking was, is definitely not something new, or the generative UI perspective is, where, you don't have an interface, but agents will define and design the interface as you go. I think what is, I don't think that UX is dead, on the contrary, but we need to explore new ways exactly to design the way individuals access to the information that they need, and remain in control, and use the right information when they need, and the product that they need. So banking or using money or paying for food is not ending. Maybe you don't have an app that you need to navigate through. Maybe you have very different device, but someone need to think, how do you design this relationship between you, money, and how you use your money, or how you manage your money into your bank account. So
now we're back to the unique design for feature products as well, so everyone can decide what they want individually as well. But okay, now here's the $1 million question then, because we also spoke about this. How will I get to the Italian wedding if everyone has their own thing going on all the time?
I was not there. But you mentioned the Italian wedding in a very interesting context, where we're discussing like social habit return and culture, and this is what make our world amazing, because you have so many traditions and cultures and rituals, which is.
But what I want to go with that is, the Italian wedding is a lot of people sharing, tradition, habits, sharing values, not always all of them agreeing with each other on what but just saying this is something we partake in. But now we're building, user interfaces. We don't even share interfaces in a moment. We'll have our own interfaces. We'll have our own, we would still want to get to the Italian wedding, wouldn't we?
Yeah, exactly. So the point for us is not to, if you start thinking about, let's say, one of the first project that I did when I was in Samsung was to redesign cameras. And actually, the CEO asked me at that time how we can redesign a better camera, because the way, especially millennials, use camera to capture photos is super important. And basically, my answer was, I don't understand cameras actually very well, but I do understand storytelling. So people, they don't need cameras, they need to tell stories. And cameras is only something that they use. So 17,000 years ago, in the Lascaux cave in France, you see the first murales, and you see a caveman designing cows or animals, and then telling the stories of those cows and animals to their, her peers. We do the same when you go to a cafe today and snap a picture of your food and post it on Instagram and share it. So the needs of storytelling remain, the tools change. So that's how we start to think in a way.
Yeah. So figuring out a way to, I just think it's so interesting. This, it's not something I would put to you to say to fix, right? But it would be nice to say, let's build an Italian wedding or something like that. But it's a societal transition that's going on, right? That I still think super interesting. The whole bowling alone thing from the 90s and all that, right? Where people start to bowl alone instead of doing it in teams and with other people.
Right.
And now we're accelerating that or not. And sometimes then I see my kids sometimes they're like, oh, I don't want to just sit around playing alone. I'm mostly on Snapchat. I'm mostly just talking with my friends.
Well, one of my former colleagues, an amazing professor at MIT, Shirley Tarkle, and she used to say, we expect more from technologies than from each other. So that's the danger that we see right now with mobile devices, and it's when you offset your relationship into the number of connections you have on social media rather than really building like a connection at the personal level. So that's our element that we really need to consider moving forward, and these are very important. The way me and my teams we think when we design anything. So,
Federico, this has been a great conversation, and I've loved having you on the show. I really enjoyed it very, very, very much. You even gave me the goosebumps at one point, as I told you. That doesn't happen very often, I must say, on this show. I think it's happened maybe once before, but it actually happened today. So thank you for that. I have one final question for you before we'll end this show, and it is the capstone of the podcast, The Only Constant. So are you ready for that question?
I'm ready. It was a pleasure for me to have all this very intriguing discussion for you. And yes, I'm ready for the question.
So, Federico, what is the only constant?
The only constant is humans. We had all this discussion throughout this conversation, and I would say humans at two levels. Number one, in the job that we do, is really trying to keep humans at the center of what we do. And then design, really understanding people, understanding culture, understanding lifestyle, understanding relationship. And then designing products and experiences, taking advantage of amazing technologies, but designing product experiences that help people to go through their own life, to live better, to live healthier, happier, more productive, and so on. So in a way, I still strongly believe that human-centered design is a very fundamental approach. And when I say human, of course, I consider as well the environment, the planet, and so on. So one is how we can keep designing with you. The second aspect of it is, at the end of the day, humans are the one who design and build. I mean, even though we're saying that artificial intelligence can execute tasks on our behalf, but we're building that. So, humans, we not only design for humans, but we are the humans who design. And our work nowadays is really changing. So, what I mean by that is that we no longer design only the products that people will utilize, but we design the intelligence of the products that they have an independent life from us. In other words, if you were a designer 30 years ago and you needed to design how cars stop, your work would have been to design the gears, the pedals, to understand the dimension of the windshield so the drivers could have a good point of view. So you really design how the humans can activate the mechanism to stop the car. From this atom age, physical age, we move into an electric age where you put some sensors. So as a designer, not only you design the pedals, but you have the sensors so the car knows where to stop, or you're too close to a wall, for example. But you're still designing the mechanisms. Today, if you're a designer, you no longer design the pedal, but you design how the car must think when to stop or not. So self-driving cars, for example, they reduced in the past 10 years. They improve incredibly the way they drive, avoiding accident. I think they went from accident reduction with autopilot from 40% to 90% today, which means that, but someone needs to design the intent of this car and tell the car when to stop and why. And this is happening at all levels. This is happening when you design the way you collect memories through your photography in your gallery, for example. This is happening when you design how health devices measure your health and well-being and how they talk to the end user. So designers are really becoming the designer of the intent in this age of AI, and provide us amazing opportunities. So when you ask what is the only constant, I would say really the only constant is humans, because we design for humans and we're the humans who design. And I will end by saying design, something that we use in our office. Design is an act of love towards the people that we design. And I think we have amazing opportunities nowadays with the technologies and tools that we have to do good. So very positive look into the future.
I think that's a great constant, Federico, and I think you said both humans, but also gave it, love as well in the end here, which I really, really like a lot. And I think it's a great constant. I think it's great also to put not just humans as the goal, but also as basically the tool, the producers of it, which I think is an interesting add-on to that we need to remember. And people tend to forget, AI can improve itself, do itself. No, at the end of the day, someone is telling it where to go, So Federico, thank you so much for being with me on this episode. It's been brilliant talking to you, and I look forward to connecting with you in the future as well.
100%. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you, Lasse. It was amazing.
Thank you for listening. If you liked this episode, share it with a friend or a colleague.